Imagine looking out your window at 4 in the morning. The temperature outside is sub-zero. The wind is howling. And standing in your driveway is a mob of furious, freezing people frantically pounding on your front door. They're screaming. They're panicking. Because every single one of their cars, the cars they illegally parked on your private property, has been entombed in a solid, impenetrable block of solid ice. They thought they could walk all over me. They thought my property was theirs for the taking. But they were about to learn that revenge is a dish best served, literally freezing cold. If you have ever had your personal space violated, if you've ever been completely disrespected by entitled people who think the rules simply don't apply to them, then pull up a chair and get comfortable. You are going to love this one. If you've ever dreamed of serving absolute, unquestionable justice to someone who wronged you, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and get ready. Because today's story is a masterclass in petty, perfectly legal, and deeply satisfying revenge. Let's get into it. To truly understand the pure, unadulterated satisfaction of this revenge, you have to understand the setting. This didn't happen yesterday. This happened about 20 years ago, in the sprawling, heavily populated suburbs of Chicago. Now, if you know anything about the Chicago suburbs, you know two things to be absolutely true. The winters are brutal, and parking is practically a blood sport. Our family owned a modest but proud little real estate footprint. We had 2 apartment buildings side by side. They were classic Chicago 3 flats, 3 units in each building. We lived in 2 of the units, and we rented out the other 4. This was our livelihood. This was the result of years of our family's blood, sweat, and tears. We took immense pride in our property. But the real crown jewel of our property wasn't the brickwork or the floor plans. It was the land. See, our street was a canyon of these 3 flats, lining both sides of the road for nearly a solid mile. Most of these buildings were crammed together with barely a sliver of grass between them, and almost none of them had dedicated parking. The side streets were residential houses, meaning street parking was a chaotic, daily battle of musical chairs. People would circle for 20 minutes just to park 3 blocks away from their front door. But our family, because we lived there, and because we had purchased a double lot, we had an oasis. We had a massive paved private parking lot in the back that could comfortably fit 16 cars. It was a luxury. It was our sanctuary. And for literally decades, everything was peaceful. Our tenants had their spots, we had ours, and life was good. Until the entitlement crept in. It started subtly. A rogue car here, an unfamiliar license plate there. You know how it is. Someone thinks, oh, I'm just running inside for 5 minutes. I'll just park in this private lot. No one will care. But 5 minutes turns into an hour. 1 car turns into 3. Suddenly, our paying tenants were coming home from long shifts at work, exhausted, only to find some random stranger's sedan sitting in their designated spot. It was infuriating. There is a specific kind of psychological violation that happens when someone takes what is yours, simply because it's convenient for them. It makes you feel powerless. It makes you feel disrespected in your own home. I decided enough was enough. I wasn't going to be a victim on my own land. One afternoon, I looked out the window and saw a car I didn't recognize parked right in the middle of our lot, brazenly taking up a spot. I felt my blood pressure spike. I grabbed my keys, marched out to my car, and I blocked him in. I parked horizontally right behind his bumper. Let's see how you like being inconvenienced, I thought. I went back inside, made myself a cup of coffee, and waited for the inevitable knock on the door. I was ready for an apology. I was ready to give a stern lecture. But that's not what happened. About an hour later, I heard an engine revving, loudly. I looked out the window, expecting to see the guy pacing around, looking for the owner of the car blocking him. Instead, I saw a masterclass in pure, arrogant destruction. This absolute a-hole, realizing he was blocked in, didn't come to apologize. He didn't come to ask me to move. He threw his car into drive, cranked the steering wheel hard, and hit the gas. I watched in stunned, paralyzed disbelief as his heavy tires tore directly into our beautifully maintained landscaping. He drove straight over our bushes, crushing the branches, snapping the roots, and tearing deep, ugly, muddy ruts across our pristine front lawn to bypass my car and get to the street. I ran outside, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Hey!" I yelled, waving my arms, but he just sped off, leaving a trail of ruined earth and broken wood in his wake. I stood there, staring at the destroyed bushes. My hands were shaking, not from the wind, but from a white-hot, blinding rage. It wasn't just about the parking anymore. It was about the sheer, arrogant disrespect. The message he sent was clear. Your property means nothing to me. I do what I want. I immediately called the police. I filed a report. I pointed to the tire tracks. I showed them the broken bushes. But the cops just gave me that sympathetic, useless shrug. Unless I had his license plate, which I didn't get in time, or a confession, there was nothing they could do. "It's a civil matter," they said. I was completely powerless, and I hated it. I realized the police weren't going to protect my property. I had to do it myself. The next day, I called a local towing company. I signed a contract with them and bought heavy, official reflective warning signs. I spent the afternoon drilling them into the brick of our buildings and mounting them on metal posts right at the entrance of the lot. Private property, unauthorized vehicles will be towed at owner's expense. It felt good. It felt like I was taking my power back. The arrangement was simple. We had to physically call the tow company to authorize a tow. They wouldn't just patrol it. But the visual threat was enough, and for a while it worked like a charm. The random cars vanished. The lot returned to being our private sanctuary. The sting of the ruined bushes faded. I thought the war was over. I thought I had won. But I was wrong. The universe was just setting the stage for the final boss battle. Fast forward to New Year's Eve. If you have never experienced New Year's Eve in the Chicago suburbs, let me paint a picture for you. It is dark by 4:30 p.m. The sky is a flat, heavy slate gray. And the cold is aggressive. It's the kind of sub-zero temperature that physically hurts your face the second you step outside. The wind cuts through your coat, your sweater, right into your bones. I had been out running errands, picking up some last-minute things for the holiday. I was tired. I was freezing. All I wanted was to pull into my spot, walk into my warm house, take off my boots, and relax. I turned onto my street, navigating the narrow lanes choked with parked cars on both sides. I put my blinker on, turned the wheel to pull into our private lot, and slammed on the brakes. I blinked, rubbing my eyes, convinced I was hallucinating. The lot was full. And I don't just mean a few spots were taken. I mean every single one of our 16 spots was occupied by a car I did not recognize. But it didn't stop there. Because the spots were full, people had just decided to start making their own spots. Cars were parked horizontally behind other cars. They were parked on the grass. They were jutting out into the alleyway. It was a gridlocked sea of foreign metal. They had turned my home into a free-for-all public parking garage. I sat in my idling car in the street, staring at the chaos. My jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. The sheer, unmitigated audacity of it washed over me. The disrespect was staggering. The giant, reflective tow signs were staring right at them, and they had completely ignored them. I had to park 3 blocks away in the freezing, biting cold and trudge back to my own house. By the time I walked through my front door, I wasn't just angry, I was practically vibrating with rage. I immediately grabbed the phone and dialed the tow company. This is it, I thought. I'm going to ruin all of their nights. I'm going to have a fleet of tow trucks clear this lot out. The dispatcher answered. I gave my address and demanded they send trucks immediately. There was a pause on the line. Then, the dispatcher let out a tired sigh. Listen, buddy, I'm sorry. It's New Year's Eve, half the city is drunk, there are accidents everywhere, and people are parked illegally all over the county. We are slammed. I can't get a truck out to you for at least 4, maybe 5 hours. My heart sank. 4 or 5 hours? The party these people were at would be over by then. They would come back, get in their cars, and drive away, suffering 0 consequences. They were going to get away with it. Again. I hung up the phone. I looked out the kitchen window at the sea of metal sitting smugly on my property. I can't let them win, I thought. I refuse to let them win. I stood by the window, watching the icy wind whip across the lot. It was well below 0 now, dangerously cold. And then, I had an idea. It started as a tiny spark in the back of my mind, a fleeting thought of petty revenge. But as I stared at the frost forming on the window pane, the spark ignited into a full-blown, brilliantly diabolical plan. The tow company couldn't come for 5 hours. Fine. That meant I had 5 hours where these cars were completely, entirely stationary. 5 hours where the temperature was sitting at a bone-chilling -5 degrees Fahrenheit. I walked into the garage and started digging through the winter storage, past the snow shovels, past the bags of rock salt. Deep in the back, I found what I was looking for: the summer lawn sprinklers and 3 long, heavy-duty garden hoses. Now, you might be thinking, if it's below 0, a garden hose will freeze solid in 10 minutes. And you'd be right. Which is why I didn't connect the hose to the outside spigot. Instead, I dragged the hoses through the back door, down the hall, and into our laundry room. I unscrewed the connector for the washing machine and attached the main hose directly to the deep sink faucet. And then I turned the knob. But I didn't turn on the cold water. I turned the hot water on full blast. The woman with the nasal voice laughed again. Honestly, if you're going to pay for it, at least get a good surgeon so you don't look like a plastic doll. That was it. The breaking point. The fear was gone. The embarrassment was completely gone. I was no longer the victim of their petty high school bullying. I was a survivor of a disease that kills hundreds of thousands of women, and I was not going to be intimidated by a table of drunken, arrogant fools. I didn't rush. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my wine. I set the glass down gently on the coaster, ensuring it didn't make a sound. Then I slowly turned my stool around. I didn't just glance at them. I locked eyes with the ringleader, the woman with the nasal voice. I stared directly into her soul with a look so cold, so dead, it physically stopped her mid-laugh. The table went quiet. They realized they had been caught. For a split second, I saw that familiar, defiant flicker in their eyes. The, "What are you gonna do about it?" look that bullies always have. I let the silence hang there for 3 agonizingly long seconds. Let them feel the weight of my gaze. Let them squirm under the spotlight they had created. Then, keeping my voice perfectly level, completely calm, and just loud enough for their entire table and the bartender to hear, I asked a single question. "You know what I hate more than fake breasts?" They froze. No one blinked. No one breathed. The frat boy guy opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The woman with the nasal voice just stared at me, the color rapidly draining from her overly bronzed face. I held her gaze, didn't break eye contact for a microsecond, and delivered the knockout punch. Breast cancer. I have never in my life seen a group of arrogant, loud-mouthed adults completely disintegrate so fast. It was absolute, catastrophic devastation. The psychological equivalent of a nuclear bomb going off at their table. You could actually see the life leave their bodies. The sheer, unadulterated horror that washed over their faces was something I will remember on my deathbed. They suddenly realized exactly what they had done. They hadn't just mocked a vain woman, they had brutally bullied a cancer survivor about her post-mastectomy body. The silence that followed was suffocating. It was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The woman who had been making the loudest jokes actually brought her hand up to cover her mouth. Her eyes widened in pure panic and shame. The guys looked down at their shoes, their drinks, anywhere but at me. They looked physically ill. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of them drowning in their own guilt, one of the guys, the one who had been laughing the hardest earlier, swallowed hard. "Shit," he mumbled, his voice trembling. "Sorry, we're so sorry." I didn't say, "It's okay," because it wasn't okay. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I just stared at them, letting the silence condemn them, until they couldn't take the unbearable weight of their own shame anymore. Without saying another word, the nasal-voiced woman grabbed her purse. The rest of the group silently, awkwardly scrambled out of their chairs. They didn't finish their expensive drinks. They didn't ask for the check. They simply left cash on the table, turned around, and practically ran out of the bar, keeping their heads down the entire way to the door. They couldn't even look the bartender in the eye on their way out. Less than 30 seconds later, the door opened again. But this time, it was my husband. He walked over, looking incredibly handsome in his suit, completely oblivious to the massacre that had just occurred. He kissed my cheek, sat down in the empty space the bullies had just vacated, and asked, "Hey, beautiful, sorry I'm late. How was your wait?" I looked at the half-empty glasses left behind by the people who had tried to ruin my night. I looked down at the low-cut blouse I had bravely chosen to wear. I felt the steady, strong beat of my heart, a heart that was still beating because of the very scars those people had tried to mock. I looked back at my husband, and a massive, genuine smile broke across my face. "Honestly," I said, "it was actually pretty entertaining." I told him the story right then and there. And instead of getting angry, instead of letting it ruin our anniversary, we sat together in that dim, beautiful bar, and we laughed. We laughed at their ignorance. We laughed at their spectacular retreat. But mostly, we laughed because we were alive, we were together, and absolutely nothing was going to take our joy away. You know, there's a profound lesson hidden in this story. People are so incredibly quick to judge based on a surface-level glance. We see something we don't understand, or something that doesn't fit our standard of normal, and the human instinct is to mock it, to categorize it, to tear it down. But you never, ever know the battles someone is fighting. You don't know the scars hidden beneath the fabric, or the unimaginable prices people have paid just to survive. The next time you feel the urge to pass judgment on a stranger, remember this story. Because karma has a very funny, very brutal way of exposing ignorance. If that moment of absolute, 6-word justice gave you chills, do me a favor and absolutely smash that like button. I want to hear from you down in the comments. What is the most satisfying, instantaneous dose of karma or revenge you have ever witnessed in public? Let me know. I read every single one. And of course, if you want more stories of brilliant revenge, psychological victories, and people getting exactly what they deserve, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. Stay strong, stay kind, but never be afraid to stand up for yourself. I'll see you in the next video.